What are you talking about?
We both have dead parents.
My mom didn't really die. She just never came to any of my birthdays. You've got a plan, right?
Oh, whispering. At least 3/8 of a plan. Right here. 2/8. I'll be honest, all I've got is the letter P, but sometimes that's all I need. Yeah, I see you, drug leader, the alpha dog of the apex predators. Benny! Benny!
Better written. Pillar of Hope. Better written. Very cliched. Better written. Pillar of Hope. Better written. Very cliched. But I still felt that story was fairly boring.
That's all this year is. You don't even have to watch it in order.
Better written. Very cliched.
Who cares about Doctor Who? Series 12, Episode 3, Orphan 55. Talking this episode will be myself, Neo from Australia, coming off the back of finding the two-part Spyfall premiere a sort of fascinating mess, as well as in Giga from England, coming off the back of finding the two-part Spyfall premiere a sort of frustrating mess, would you say, Gig?
Frustrating is a quite nice way of putting it, but yeah, that's about right.
And also joining us are Disco from England, who I do not think would object to being described as something of a cynic about Series 12 so far. And rounding out the discussion this week is our very own Hunter, an American with his fingers in all sorts of Doctor Who related pies, one might say.
Hello.
Before we discuss what we thought of this episode, Orphan 55, can we first just clarify what we thought happened in the episode? What was the plot and the story this week?
I mean, do you know, Neo, what happened? Because I'm at a loss for words. I don't know what happened. I'm really confused. I don't know if the Earth is destroyed. I don't know how it can be if humans reached for the stars and Earth wasn't destroyed until 5 billion. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's confusing in the moment of watching it, and then when you finish and you think about it, you get even more confused. Do either of our resident Brits here have a better understanding of it than me and Hunter?
Well, in the same sense that you can have, like, 3 versions of Atlantis in Classic Who, I guess, you might as well have, multiple versions of Earth's future as well. Honestly, I find that whole canon retconning aspect to be probably the least problematic aspect of everything this story is doing, because it's the kind of thing you can just hand wave away and not really care about, whereas I think the problems with the episode go a lot more deep and more structural, I think.
Disco, did you understand anything?
Truth be told, despite having a full A4 sheet of notes in front of me, I'm just at a loss of how to describe it. It's just... What was it? What was it?
I think if, I try to put it in as few words as I can, which is probably for the best, it was... So the Doctor and the fam went on a holiday to a place where a furry greeted them, and Ryan got a virus from a vending machine and sucked his thumb to flirt with a girl. And then the holiday resort turned out to be some kind of under the dome-esque thing in this Blade Runner 2049 wasteland that turned out to be the real world wasteland of Siberia. A guy called Benny got lost, and his would-be wife kept screaming his name again and again and again and again and again. There was a weird mother-daughter relationship where the mother didn't recognize the daughter, and they kept doing all sorts of confusing things. And there were these monsters that looked pretty scary in these close-ups in the dark, and they looked kind of silly when they were just walking around outside. I'm struggling to pass any more from that. Oh, it was like a climate change episode. It was like, you've got to not pollute and stuff, otherwise we'll turn into, the Morlocks from the Time Machine, and Siberia will look, barren, which we just can't have.
There was a young woman who wanted to commit terrorism because her mum didn't come to any of her birthday parties. I think that was in there somewhere.
That was interesting motivation.
Yeah.
Don't forget how the episode turned into midnight halfway through.
It was very similar, wasn't it?
But strikingly similar.
like they're also confined into one truck, aren't they? It's just becomes a one-room drama, and one gets the sense that maybe they didn't have enough budget to do anything outside the truck for that part of the episode.
I think this entire episode has used the word Benny more times than the Bernie Summerfield audios.
Would not be surprised.
That one.
That's a bit of a deep cut.
Right.
It's just, I mean, my dad and I watched this show. We've seen pretty much every Doctor, from their start to their finish, and he said this was his favorite episode by far, probably of the entire series.
That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
What, of series 12 or of Doctor Who as a whole?
Of Doctor Who.
Oh.
What? I guess I think the writer Ed Heim has, for better or worse, a kind of unique style that I could get someone kind of liking. Like, it takes you away from series 11. That was pretty well liked among most people, I think, because it definitely felt like this isn't just another by the numbers, Doctor Who or series 11 episode. It takes you away. Felt weird. It felt like the writer maybe had things he wanted to say, wanted to explore in his own unique ways. And this episode, like, it's super derivative, but I still felt this kind of, I can tell that there's a specific dude kind of writing this, that doesn't necessarily make it good, but like, I find this more memorable than other Dead Planet knockoffs we've had. Maybe not for the right reasons.
Yeah, I agree. It's memorable, but for all the wrong reasons.
I think Ed Heim's episodes, I think they suggest that he has a bit of a grasp on the sort of things you would expect to be done with Doctor Who, that maybe some of Chibnall's era maybe doesn't quite have that same grasp on. Like, you can kind of see more of that New Who DNA in something like It Takes You Away, or even in this, albeit it might be mangled by a rushed production schedule, than you might see in, say, The Ghost Monument, or, I don't know, you see what you know.
A thing with Heim, I don't know if I'm off base saying this, but he feels like he's of like the generation that, how like when they started New Who, all these writers were born out of the wilderness, and you could tell they were pulling from the Virgin New Adventures and the Eighth Doctor Adventures for like ideas and things. I feel like by this point, people are pulling from New Who itself. Like, It Takes You Away, I felt, was kind of a riff on Moffat stuff in a way. It set up all these genre diversions that collapsed into a kind of fairy tale-esque thing. And then this felt like kind of a way of filtering through all the Dead Planet Terry Nation-esque classic Who episodes, but through like the Ghost Monument, or like through Ranskorav Kolos, with like the weird wasteland incoherence of everything. And like every 5 minutes, it's like the episode would reinvent itself, but it would never really make any of these 5-minute segments work.
Yeah, it just felt kind of, how do I put this? It felt very, it felt very disconnected from itself. It didn't work for me, and this is one of the few episodes of the 13th Doctor era that I didn't enjoy. I mean, I rate Series 12 an 8 out of, Series 11 an 8 out of 10. I think I mentioned that last time, but
indeed,
I just feel like my preconceived judgments on how Series 12 would be, or could be, are kind of quashed. I really don't think it's going to get any better.
When you say, Hunter, that it felt disconnected from itself, I really get what you mean, because like the whole crux of the story is Kane, this like character who's really confusing on her own terms, because she's like the head of security and she's also like the CEO, like the head honcho in the first place. It's like a weird conflation of two characters you'd think would be separate in the script. Anyway, this whole episode depends on this woman not recognizing her daughter, which is like strange to me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parental relationship stuff in the script.
Oh, yes.
And I think like what seems to be the case is that you've got this whole ensemble of characters, and rather than feeding interestingly and coherently into the themes of the story, which I think you can tell that Ed Heim wants them to do, they end up feeling quite scattered and all over the place. Like the whole generational parental thing, that's clearly supposed to be commenting on the climate change idea and the idea of trying to do something for your kids, or your kids rebelling against you, or resenting what you've done. But instead of actually cogently kind of working that through in ways that reflect the themes, you've just got some really random stuff, like stuff that just feels very just off the cuff and really difficult to make sense of. You've got Silas wandering off for no reason to his almost death and then coming back, and you've got the mum kind of disappearing and reappearing, and you've got Bella who wants to kind of blow up the hotel because her mum didn't come to her birthday parties and stuff, and it just feels underdrafted. Like, I just feel a few more drafts of this, you could really get something solid going.
The birthday party line feels like a placeholder, like, oh, later on I should add a motivation for this character. That's like the joke line that, the birthday parties. Like, it's absolutely, feels like it needed so much redrafting.
Yeah, but with Silas, not only does he piss off for 5 minutes, but he also locks everyone inside the linen cupboard. I mean, what did he do that for? Like, what, did he suddenly gain these suicidal tendencies? Or something, and decide to just piss off and get himself killed?
Was Silas the green-haired one?
Yes,
yeah, the little
child.
boy.
Oh, yes.
It's mind-boggling. Why would you write that in?
I feel like the scene that I'm not going to say worked the best. I feel like the scene that had the most potential to work was that one where the doctor's confronting, how does she describe it? The alpha dog, apex predator, Wheezy, the big dreg. And this is kind of a, like, there's things going on in this scene. So the idea is the 13th Doctor creates a closed environment with the dreg, because the thing is they're breathing each other's gases, because humans breathe in oxygen and the dregs are reversed. That's like the interesting reveal about them. And so we're kind of paralleling the dreg with its ancestors of humanity, and the Doctor with the natural process, I guess, of breathing. And the dreg is benefiting from, if the dreg killed the Doctor and everyone, it would benefit from that, but not in the long term. It needs the kind of symbiosis, the interaction between the two of them, to not suffocate. That's why he wouldn't be able to open the door without that. So the stalemate of that was kind of interesting to me, although it's hampered by the dreg, not really being able to act. It's a person in a, silly suit. But the dreg having to de-escalate the scenario for them to survive, it feels like a more nuanced thing than just like the climate change speech at the end. The dreg has to accept what the Doctor is trying to impose onto it, the terms the Doctor is imposing, this kind of life support system idea. And so the dreg is kind of transcending its human ancestors, which, they didn't do this de-escalation, at least on the episode's idea of what humanity is going to do. They didn't de-escalate. They all died or mutated into dregs, and the people who caused the problems in the first place, just absconded because they were the elites that could afford spaceships to, go set up the beast below or whatever.
It struck me, that scene you're talking about with the Doctor in the cage, and then confronting the dreg. On my rewatch, which I did at double speed, obviously, I noticed that scene is like 4 minutes from the end of the episode. It's so close to the end, even though if this was any other episode, it's the kind of scene that might come, 10 to 15 minutes from the end. Like before the Doctor then figures out some amazing solution to sort of solve the problem, or otherwise like move the story along. Whereas this episode feels so truncated that it's just this little scene tucked away almost at the end, and all we get after that is some running around and then everyone just teleporting away. Like the structure of the story is so concertinaed and just sort of mashed up. It's really, some people have commented that it feels like half an episode, or like it's unfinished, like it just stops midway, and it's a bit Sleep No More-esque in that sense. It's been compared to that episode, but it seems to have almost even less of a resolution to it than that did. It's very puzzling.
Do you think I'm being too charitable to Heim to like map onto like a interesting kind of climate change parallel in that scene? Was it just meant to be like a escaping from the monster thing? Like I'm not even a particular fan of his style at all, but I can't tell if I'm just reaching in the dark to try to entertain myself with the episode or not. The status of confusion I have with this episode is so great that I can't tell what's interesting and what isn't interesting. I feel so fractured.
Well, I definitely think that the best I can say about this episode is that when it wanted to create a mystery, it confused people instead. And that's the best thing I can say about it. The worst thing I can say is that the motivation piece, being a writer myself, I kind of cringed at it. I really, really didn't think there was much of a motivation for any of the characters, really.
Yeah, everyone just.
And I mean, they just kind of stayed there, even though they knew that they could teleport back at any time. Even I don't know. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, it's like the characters never really got characterized because they never had time to settle. It was like every 5 minutes the episode reinvented itself, and there was another twist. Oh, they're in Russia. Oh, the hotels only extends this many meters out into the environment. Oh, the dregs are humans. It's like I never really got like I don't understand the two green-haired people at all. Like that was like the tiniest little arc. It reminded me of the Graham Ryan stuff in series 11, which was like so weirdly inert in how just like, oh, they don't get on, and then he calls him son or whatever, and hooray. It was just like that, except it was built on what the Jay from In-Betweeners was insecure about his son being a better mechanic than him, and then half an hour later he gets over it. Like this is a pretty dreadful C plot.
And there are too many characters, aren't there? Like
it's a weird amount of characters. Yeah, it's like a classic Who, 4-parter or 6-parter, but compressed into how long? This was shorter than a regular Chib Who episode.
Wasn't it?
46.
Yeah,
so it was about the length of a regular New Who episode pre-Chibnall.
Yeah,
I thought the strangest thing was that they thought this could work. As in, like, they thought it could give the message of climate change and all that, which is a good message. They thought it could give the desired effect with, and it's almost like a sort of, oh, we're going to do something about this, and then they go back to the TARDIS. And it's all tied up with someone sucking their thumb as kind of like, hey, look at me, I remember everything that we've been through, and they do that by sucking their thumb.
But why couldn't they just go back there in the TARDIS, though? Like, all they have to do is materialise around the two of them, and then just go off home. But they just abandon them. It's just
13, she can't be bothered. She couldn't be bothered getting Robertson. She couldn't be bothered doing, I don't know.
The 46 minutes have passed. She has to move on to the next, episode at this point.
Oh my god.
Hunter, you asked that question you asked how they could have thought this would work and deliver the desired message. And I think if you reduce this episode down to a summary of its core elements, like there's a ruined planet that they find out is Earth, the future humans have mutated into the monster of the week, and it turns out that they're us, and also the humans are trying to kind of terraform the planet by making some luxury hotel or whatever. Just those elements, I think you could get a good episode out of that, or at least a decent one. And I think you could do commentary on climate change with those ideas. And I think that must have sounded like quite a good pitch to Chibnall or whoever came up with this. But the problem is really the execution. It's so slapdash, and it's so tripping over itself, and it's so directionless and incoherent that it just can't. I do think there's a sympathetic idea behind all of it, but it just doesn't get materialized.
I don't really feel the climate change connection at all. I don't feel like it's really baked into the episode, and not just because of I keep returning to the fact that Siberia is the worst place to choose to set this story, because it's not a reveal to make Siberia a wasteland. There should have been it should have been an actual holiday resort. It should have been Florida or, you know, the Gold Coast, somewhere really pretty and somewhere people actually would have had vacations before. And then it would have, you know, been interesting that they've faked, like, oh, it used to be like it was. You know, that maps on much better onto, you know, current climate change kind of things. You know, like the Great Barrier Reef keeps getting advertised, even though it's getting bleached to hell and so much of it looks horrible now and all that kind of thing. But, like, this could be a Terry Nation Dead Planet-esque thing, and you could just remove the didactic climate change speech and a few other little bits and bobs like that, and the episode would operate fine. Like, there's no real climate change element to it, I think, beyond just like the lecturing. And that's why I think we get those problems. Like, the speech at the end is ridiculous because the fam aren't going to go campaign back in Sheffield. They're just going to keep going on adventures with the Doctor for at least 2 more years. You know, so the message is obviously intended for the audience, but it's in a way that doesn't even work, like, in the context of the fiction. So it's that, you know, that's poor writing. It feels off. It feels like you're being lectured at. And even when you agree with the message, as, you know, plenty of viewers would have, that it still doesn't feel good.
Speaking of poor writing, show don't tell. That's a thing, isn't it, in television? They meant to show something and not just say it. Well, they blatantly violated that plenty of times with the dregs, in that you're constantly being told, oh, they're bad, oh, they're really, really bad, oh, they're really, really fast, but you never see it.
Yeah, we don't even see them kill anyone, do we? We don't see what the hell they did to Benny.
Well, I wrote that down as a note here. We don't see.
We don't see.
It's like they also commit the mortal sin of showing the rubber suits in broad daylight in a wide-angle shot. I mean, you don't do that. And there's that one like really dodgy CGI shot of one for some reason.
You'd think after over half a century of this show, they would understand not to put the rubber suits, you know, in broad daylight, stark landscapes like that.
They're just always shambling along. And it's just...
Yeah, one gets the sense that the whole presentation of the dregs was so hampered by the production. There's at one point where Yaz and Ryan kind of are running around and they see one burst through the wall ahead of them or whatever, but we don't see that. All we see is like a massive super close-up of a dreg, which could have been from anywhere else in the episode, just cut in. Yeah. And it's like, I get the sense that maybe either they couldn't shoot that for whatever reason, or they didn't have the time or the budget, or it didn't come out right. And the same thing goes with that CGI shot randomly inserted. I just feel so many elements of this are last minute, oh god, how do we fix this? Quick, you know, put a band-aid on it. And I think that last climate speech might almost be something similar. Like maybe someone said, okay, hang on a minute, this episode doesn't actually communicate a climate change theme very well. Let's have the Doctor just explain it at the end to the viewers. Maybe we can put that on YouTube and say, ooh, she's Space Greta Thunberg, which is what they ended up doing.
Hold on, I'm going to check how many dislikes that video's got. Hold on.
I think it's got like 1/3 dislikes.
Hold on. No, it doesn't, because I checked earlier and it was definitely about half and half.
That's rough.
Hold on. 526 against 653.
Is that which one's likes and which one's dislikes?
Likes to dislikes. So more dislikes than likes now.
Oh boy.
34k views. I'm sorry, under the video it links you to the Wikipedia page for global warming.
Super useful.
That sounds like something we'd make up. It doesn't sound like something that'd actually be true.
No, it actually does. Like, I've not seen this on YouTube before. It actually there's just a straight up link, like between the video player and the title.
Wikipedia, please explain what global warming is. That's great. That's great.
Oh god.
My main thing is that global warming is mentioned like once, just like, oh, the planet's resources have been depleting and there's a war that broke out. That was mentioned once, and then it's suddenly the big like reason for them. You know what I mean, right? It's very disingenuous to consider this the message if it's absolutely not the message that they were wanting to give. They didn't write that in there. It's very strange. It's very strange.
If you want to hide your main theme in just one throwaway line of dialogue earlier in an episode, you have to be named Stephen Moffat.
Yeah, that initial speech that 13 gives, she reels off all those things. So, like, climate change, mass migration, war, and they're all just kind of, it's very vague. Like, it's just a vague sense of, the Earth is doomed because of all these various problems. And I think there's something, and that's the right word, actually, disingenuous. I think it's a bit dishonest as well, because it's kind of, it's a cop-out. It lets the show get out of actually saying anything specific, or saying you need to do this, you need to do that. It's just the Doctor going, oh, you need to change. You need to just vaguely, just generally change something. And she says that immortal line, be the best of humanity, which is a cliche we've heard in New Who several times. And I tire of all that kind of rhetoric, because it's so, if you become a better person, the world will be saved. And it's just such a get out clause from actually, agitating for any specific direct action or anything that might really make a change. It's just designed to maybe make you feel a bit better about yourself, maybe make you feel like, as long as I'm morally beautiful, that means I'm doing something good. And it's bizarre to me, and I think it's a bit sad.
I think it's designed to just get on a like a button that you can wear on like a lanyard or something.
Yeah,
it's just a tag that, be the best of humanity. That doesn't mean anything to me. That means very little. What it means to me, at least, is we want you to do this specific thing in the way we want you to do it, and we will keep throwing this specific message in your face until you comply. If you understand. I mean, I'm not trying to say climate change is something that we can, dispute, because obviously it's there. It's just the way that we deal with it is, it's a hard thing to say, but I really don't think it is the best and most responsible thing to do.
I think the show is really trying to, I think the show is feeling like it needs to be seen as relevant. It needs to have at least some soundbite that people can point to and go, look,
soundbite, that's a good way.
Yeah, Doctor Who addresses this relevant theme of climate change, even if it doesn't do that very well. I think it's a bit cynical. I think they're doing it because it's the thing to talk about now. It's in the news a lot, and if it were by some chance to go out of the news, though I don't think that's very likely given what's going on, given that Australia's literally on fire. If it were to go out of the news, you would see it go out of Doctor.
Yeah, I think back to I've been thinking back to Kill the Moon after watching this episode, twice at this point, because like this episode's relationship to society and what people should do and climate change and all this kind of thing is just like this vague. We are aligning the show with climate change is bad and people should stop it, and that's it. Like there's no actual message. I would say there's not even any real ideology to it. There's alignment to it, like it's aligning itself with these symbols or this narrative, but it's not actually saying anything. Because if you say something, people can criticize, and there's specifics and there's tangibles to latch onto, and things become contentious. And I mean, obviously, this is contentious in how poorly it was done, hence all the dislikes on the video. But there's not any real ideology here to like rub up against, which is the problem in the first place. But I remember Kill the Moon, it's flat out anti-democratic. Like Clara ignores, the message from humanity, the message from the lights, and she does what she feels is the moral thing. Anyway, in that kind of scenario, that's like a very specific course of action that the episode is, kind of promoting, I guess, by virtue of having the main character, go through with it and the Doctor kind of endorse it. And of course that wasn't, I don't know if the anti-democratic thing really gets fixated on, because that episode has so many tangible elements that people, take issue with. But that was an episode that was saying things, and therefore it was taking risks, and therefore, it's remembered and it's liked and it's disliked. But this, it's not going to have any of that, because it's not really saying anything. It's like you guys are saying, all it does is kind of go, we're Doctor Who's about climate change. Let's move on now.
The thing that I'm really concerned about is how this kind of plays out for the Doctor herself. What I'm meaning is she just kind of, she doesn't know that the Earth was destroyed, so it's obviously not a fixed point. It's obviously not a fixed point in time. She doesn't know if it can, if it's the real Earth or an alternate version of it. So why doesn't she try and change the course of history? I mean, it's obviously something that the Doctor can do and always has been able to do. So, if it's not a fixed point, then why does she not help alleviate some of that stress?
I think that sort of goes back to Kill the Moon again, because in that the Doctor just pisses off because he says it's not his responsibility, it's humanity's responsibility to choose the path that they take. Yeah?
Yeah,
So,
and then Clara sort of rebukes him on that, and even he sort of repents a bit in Forest of the Night, doesn't he? Like, he says, like, okay, I do have some responsibility, I'll help you when you need it and stuff. And interestingly, I think what we're getting at here by this whole, why doesn't the Doctor change the course of history, why doesn't the Doctor help, is that a better climate change episode would have involved probably the Doctor actually, I don't know, participating or, doing something to fight climate change, instead of just being in a very abstracted adventure off in the distant future when Earth's already dead and she can just, run away from some monsters, right? It's like, it's like, that would address, Hunter, what you were talking about, and why isn't the Doctor, helping? And also, like, that whole, Kill the Moon thing of how much responsibility does the Doctor have? I think the Doctor can help with humanity, not necessarily in the playing God domineering way, but just in the sense of getting involved and just helping people out when they need it. And that you could do an episode about that. That's how the show works. It's just the show is too scared to actually do that in this case with climate change.
What I think is and this is so preventable, it's ridiculous. What the issue I think is here, and we saw it last week as well with the Nazis, is that if you're telling stories really connected to things in the present or recent history, if you're telling stories about the consequences of present-day climate change, if you're telling stories about the Nazis in the 40s, it's really difficult to interface the Doctor with that, because we keep getting back to why doesn't the Doctor do this? Why didn't they change this? And of course, there's issues like if they did change, there'd be a lot of budgetary requirements to reimagine, a world differently. And people don't like, the show's version of Earth veering too much off history. Russell T Davies' era of the show kind of had a cumulative lore of its own, and people got used to their aliens coming back at Christmas, but Stephen Moffat very quickly dashed that away because the show becomes kind of long-standing and sticky with lore in a way it doesn't really thrive in doing. At least I think most people would say when it does that. The show needs to keep present by not making its present too different from our present, and that means they can't change the present too much. So I question, why are you doing all these big stories in the present in the first place? Go do a story on some random alien planet and you can still have it as a allegory for climate change, but you can have the Doctor freely and willfully change things and affect things in all these huge big ways. And there's no complicated questions of, but in Earth's history, and this is too different to 2020 because, the show was fictional, the show was sci-fi. So why does it keep trying to do these stories somewhere where it's difficult for it to really capitalize off that? It confuses me.
I have a question. What is the motivation of, say, nuking the Earth because there's no resources? That does not make any sense. That would just make it less resources than what's already there.
Does war make any sense at all in the first place?
I think, I don't want to, how to put this? The show has a strange relationship with Russia at the moment. So, were the script to have more elements, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a kind of Dracula-esque case of, certain figures just spitefully having, doing... I'm dancing
doing
around.
Something.
Yeah. Some figures doing something. I think I could be totally off base in this, but in my imagination of, the Chibnall Who's envisionment of who set off nukes for no real reason. It would be a spiteful act by Russia, because under this show's vision, Russia is scary and bad, and Robertson's being targeted by Russians, and there's Russian interference, and Graham's afraid of the Russians.
And the Kasavin are basically a big version of Russia.
Yeah, the show is this really weird, backwards, take on Russia right now that really doesn't sit well with me. Like we have Russian friends, and it's very strange for them to watch this. Like, we're not in the 80s. I'm not saying it would even be okay then, but it's very off base. But I imagine if anyone was throwing the nukes around just out of pure malice in the show's envisioning of the worlds, that it would have been Russia.
I think they're purposely vague about it, but I think when they link climate change to sort of mass migration and war, which presumably the war would be over resources, maybe, if we're talking about a climate change scenario. How that leads to sort of a nuclear holocaust or whatever is up for debate, but I think the vagueness is just them not actually wanting to get into the nitty-gritty. They just need images that evoke worldwide destruction, and that's the quickest way they could get to it. And, we were talking, Nia, you were talking about why do this on Earth, why kind of make it about our Earth rather than some other planet where you can make it an allegory. And I think the cynical answer to that is that they put it on Earth because they really wanted to do that reveal that Orphan 55 is Earth, because they were thinking, ooh, this will be some really like memorable, iconic twist in Doctor Who, right? Ignoring the fact that Doctor Who has done this in the past more than once, and the fact it's just the Planet of the Apes twist for the millionth time. It's a sort of thing that you might think is impressive if you've never been exposed to like any sci-fi, even massive, hugely popular sci-fi. So it's a bit strange for it to be treated like some really great reveal that's worth kind of building the whole episode around. But there you go.
Didn't we have just like a few short seasons ago in Series 9, the strange reveal that like the creepy setting we were in was actually more or less Russia, although it was actually a Russian village in Scotland in Lake Flood?
Before the Flood is just one of those episodes when there's just so much things going on, it's a bit difficult to really explain, ascertain what they meant by that. But yeah, bit weird.
My take on what I can compare this episode to is it's probably going to be closest to American Horror Story Apocalypse. That one season where there's like a nuclear holocaust and just so much, like cruelty and nuclear winter, and everybody's just doing this because they want more money or something. It's really dark and really not nice. And I'd say the cynical, like you said, the cynical nature of this episode is really what put me off, because Doctor Who is not a cynical show. It's very positive, and this episode was completely different.
The ending is mean-spirited with Kane and her daughter. I didn't really notice it as much on first watch because I was kind of bowled over by the next scene, the climate change speech. But on rewatch, I was like, holy shit, they just leave these two women to, get slaughtered by these dregs. And like Disco said, they are absolutely capable of going back and saving them, with the TARDIS. Like it feels botched, it feels weird, and above all, it feels cynical and mean-spirited. And yeah, it's grating. It's strange.
Right. I've got a hot take.
Ooh, go on.
I've got a hot take. I think this episode was great. I think it was great because I think it was a parody of the show and of climate conscious things. That's the only explanation I have for why it was the way it was. It was purely parodical.
It does strike me as sort of a parodic take of stuff like Voyage of the Damned, like the cynical slaughtering of characters, usually just characters.
Well, especially in the first 15 minutes or so, I think, sort of work as a weird, dark comedy take on this sort of setting, of holiday spa and there's beasties about. Because, I found it funny. Okay, there's just so much about at least the first 15 minutes. It's just so funny to me.
I mean, you've got the Speedos joke. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and you've got the announcements where it's like, oh, if you can hear this message, you shouldn't be here. Leave immediately. That makes me laugh. And Oh, the other quote here. If I had crayons and half a can of Spam, I could build you from scratch.
That's good. I like that one.
That's a line I loved. Oh, and the psychic paper gag. That was a good one. With Hythreen.
Hythreen. However you pronounce it.
I feel the parody element absolutely in the Cerulean 4 stuff, which felt really of the same spirit as the sprinting reveal in Spyfall, where we had no foreshadowing for the Master, for O supposedly being a sprinter, and then the huge twist was he's not a sprinter when we have nothing, we don't care about this hasn't been built up for us at all, like it doesn't work. The Cerulean 4 thing in this felt like the exact same thing to me, because it's like, that's the solution, shockingly we actually can save the day or whatever, and it's because of something we never brought up beforehand, and that is no basis in any earlier lines or anything. It's like there's such a lazy slapdash form of storytelling, but to the point where, like Disco says, it actually feels kind of funny, because it's like they're not even trying, and that's always, somewhat funny.
And even the ending speech I find funny, because I think it's so out of touch.
Patronising?
Yeah, probably. It is just funny to me, especially how they do cut to the shot of the Dreg to say, "Oh, this is you. If you don't stop using things, I don't know.
Eat the bugs."
And it's just, oh my god.
I'd have to agree. I do think it's funny in a sort of sick, twisted way. I do think that laughing at people trying their hardest and failing miserably is a human trait. I mean, if you look at, videos from 2009 on YouTube, you always see those, fail compilations or whatever.
Yeah.
We can make an entire fail compilation of this episode, and it would be the whole episode.
Yeah.
The Hopper virus scene. That feels like a parody of the detox scene from Unicorn and the Wasp,
Something's inhibiting my enzymes.
So, yeah. But also another thing about that scene, I just want to get out here, I found myself not hating Ryan unusually.
Ed Heim writes him rather well, I think.
Like normally I hate Ryan because he just is so lacking in character, but suddenly in this scene, I don't know, he just seems like he's suddenly acting well.
Well, I mean, I met Tosin Cole, and he's very uncaring, I'd say, when I met him. He just felt very, I'm not a Doctor Who fan. I don't, he felt like he...
Like a Chad.
Like a Chad.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think he does sort of more, I want to say slapstick stuff well.
I think just getting humour in general.
Yeah, he's taking it maybe a bit less seriously in general, I think, because that links back to stuff like his screaming in the Ghost Monument as well. I think when it comes to stuff that just requires him to be this kind of goofy presence, I think he does quite well at that. And I love, like you say, Neo, in It Takes You Away, which is also by a time, he has this kind of douchey turn where he's making all these kind of really rude quips about the girl's dad. And I thought it was great, just because he was just sneering and stuff. I think Tosin works quite well in that whole mode.
In most episodes, he's with 13 and Yaz and his, granddad. So he's kind of cowed. He's kind of submitted, to the fair. Oh, I don't know if this is coming across well. He's
submissive.
Yeah, he's submissive. But in this, he's flirting with a girl around his own age, in a very funny fashion, and he's active in the narrative, and he's a man basically. And I think Tosin plays that so much better than just being like the sounding board for, his parental figure and for the two women he travels with. I think when you put him in situations where he gets to be a man with an active role in the story, and, so he gets the ability to make jokes, and he gets the ability to, interact with people his own age that aren't like weirdly sisterly like Yaz. I think, of course, Tosin, who's, what man in his mid-20s, maybe he's going to get to shine some of his actual personality through that. Hunter would be the authority there, but that's what I feel like is happening.
Sorry, the authority on what?
Tosin's actual personality, more so than
Oh yeah,
us other three.
he's very. I'm gonna say he's very obviously just in this role because of the whole, he would get. I don't want to be rude, but I think he's doing it because he'd get more publicity for a role like this.
Oh yeah, that's fair enough. It's his job. He's an actor,
Yeah, and so I think that he, we asked him. I mean, I asked him what his favorite episode was, and he's like, "Well, I don't know, just this one that's, he didn't really seem caring." And I mean, when you're the worst companion out of the three, I guess. Wait, what?
Are you sure he's worse than Yasmin?
It's a race to the bottom between the two of them.
All that I remember Yasmin doing this episode was muzzling Vilma when she's calling out for Benny. That's all I remember her doing.
She interrupted Benny's proposal as well. And she came to the doctor with the revelation that there was a wall around the hotel moments after the doctor figured out that there was a wall around the hotel. It's like they were flagging up how useless Yaz is. It was really weird.
There's nothing stopping people from just walking into there of their own accord. You can literally just saunter up to it. And there's not a fence or anything. Oh, and the hotel itself, hotel spa. I thought that just looked generally shit. I thought it looked cold there because of A, I don't feel the colours were warm enough, and B, it was bloody windy. You can see everyone's hair flapping about. I just don't get it. I don't get anything in this episode, which is why I think it has to be a parody.
When Graham was relaxing, he's still in his jumper and all his layers and everything, so it doesn't look warm at all. It looks like he's just at some crisp location. So there's holiday vibe.
Speedos out at any point.
Yeah, exactly. It's not communicated at all.
Speaking of Yaz earlier, I really remember Chibnall saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to do so much with her. She's going to be, so important to this new season." And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that at all. I'm really starting to doubt that he had a plan for Yasmin Khan.
Yeah, you got to feel for Mandip Gill, the actress here, because you think of her every time she gets a script. She reads The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and of course it's barely about her. It's setting up a new show, and she reads the second script, and it's got more on Ryan and Graham and their relationship. And that's fine. That makes sense. And then the next episode obviously is gonna impact Ryan, if anyone, more than the rest. And then she gets the episode about her family, and she's like, it's not really doing anything for her. And then you get the rest of series 11, and even in her family episode, Demons of the Punjab. I love this episode, but it's not really a Yaz showcase, is it? It's all series 11 passes, and Yaz never really gets her turn. Mandip never really gets her chance to try and shine.
Yeah. And
then comes series 12. You read Spyfall, and of course it's not about her. It's setting up the master and all this new law and everything. And then you get to Orphan 55, and I just feel like Mandip at this point must be sighing every script she reads. Does she even think this might be the one when she reads them now, or is she just resigned to it? I have no idea. This is probably a very cynical view. I'm sure she's having a great time with the show, but I don't know if she has any expectation of getting a showcase episode anymore.
I've just had a sudden and unrelated thought. How would this episode have changed if Graham still had the laser shoes? Or if he pulled the old soft shoe shuffle on the tracks?
That would have been an incredible sight.
You might have saved Benny if that had happened, but alas, it was not to be.
Well, yeah, because whatever the fuck happened to Benny, because I don't know, because it was...
I would have loved the shoes to be like a Sonic sunglasses thing, where they make a lot of people groan, but, they constantly use to get out of scraps. That would have been fantastic.
He could be the new K9. He could be the new K9 if he had lasers.
He's the Tin Dog.
He's the Tin Dog.
The new K9 is actually the tentacle inside the TARDIS.
They're going to leave that around.
They were just kind of cleaning around.
We didn't touch on this earlier. Actually, what I consider the most ridiculous and like unintentionally funny part of the episode is that big explosion, like right at the very end. Like we get a wide shot of the place blowing up after the fact, but for the shot where like the thing explodes for the first time and the fam are like running to get out of the way, the explosion's out of frame, but you can like see a tiny bit of it, enough to tell that they actually did an explosion. So why the hell weren't the cameras filming the explosion? Why were they just focused on this weird angle at the fam where you wouldn't get your money's worth of the explosion that you set up?
It's parody, isn't it? They did it bad on purpose.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Like you're just wasting money.
Dark place. I wonder though, did they actually do a real explosion? I know you say it looks a bit like they did, but I just wonder if it's so far off screen, could it be something they put in post-prod? Because this episode seems so much like they couldn't realise so much what they wanted to realise. It just feels so much of like we've got no time, no budget, whatever, the script's been delivered late or this has happened and we're just trying our hardest to scrape a coherent episode together. Because that seems to rationalise so many of the editing choices and script choices. And it's at a point where it's starting to seem more sad than funny, because it's not like the show is being undone by some weird neurosis on the part of the writer. It's just a shambolic production, and any potential for good ideas is being killed by that. It's being drowned. And it's not really funny to kick, because it's just things like this happen and they're just kind of mundane and sad, and it's a disappointment.
I think you're right, Gig. I think it's just depressing. It's really, really sad that nothing seems to be going the way people envisioned this episode to be. And even when I was at my local movie theater watching Spyfall, the premiere, the thing about that was Ryan said, or I mean not Ryan, Justin Cole, he was talking all about how this was his favorite episode because he thought the monsters were really scary and he was really invested in the script. And knowing how that turned out for the audience must be extremely depressing for anyone involved.
This is where I hope you're right, that like Tozen doesn't really care, like, because that's probably a good thing for his sake. I
mean, Chibnall has said he doesn't read reviews, so Chibnall's fine. I don't know about the other people who worked on it.
They're all in this insular little world, much like the vacation hotel.
I've just got one thing. We've been very negative, but one idea in this episode that I did actually think was interesting and I appreciated was the fact that the dregs, these future evolved humans, the fact that they breathe carbon dioxide or whatever and expel oxygen, the fact that they work like trees and are kind of the inverse of the humans, I thought that was actually quite fun in how it called back to the whole forests of the night thing, the whole the relationship of trees and forests like the Amazon to climate change. And I like, it's an interesting image for the successor to humanity to take on that tree-like property. I thought that was, it's an idea, not much is done with it, but it's a cool idea at least.
I thought they kind of reminded me, the dregs did, of weevils almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I might think about just taking a little bit of a break from Doctor Who. That's honestly what I'm considering, at least this new series. I really think that the episode itself kind of made my interest in this Series 12 wane a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're not going to stick around for the Timeless Child reveal then?
Oh, God.
Disco? Anything yet? Final thoughts?
I just can't believe they did a Made in China joke in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of production design choices, I don't know if any of you guys spotted that background actor with the really cool costume who was just not a character in the episode at all.
Yeah.
Like that guy who
all the extras, every single one.
I just imagine what must it be like being someone who does the really cool makeup and costume for some character who's just barely seen at all. Like spending hours painting some intricate design onto a person and for it to just be completely sidelined. It's just, that's why it's depressing, because so much effort goes into these productions, even the shit ones, and for it to just fall on its face so much, it's just, you think that effort could have gone elsewhere.
Yeah, it all comes back to the fact that it's easy to miss, but people work on these episodes.
Yes, people worked on it. So I suppose we can't really criticise it.
I'll work on you in a fucking second.
Better written. Pillar of hope. Better written. Very cliched. Better written. Pillar of hope. Better written. Very cliched. Better written. Pillar of hope. Better written. Very cliched. Better written. Pillar of hope. Better written. Very cliched. But I still felt that story was fairly boring.
That's all this year is. You don't even have to watch it in order.
Better written. Very cliched.